evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's Saturday evening in India. We've had great weather here in Chennai, where Professor Raju and I are from. And we hope that things are good wherever you are. We hope you're all staying safe. These are troubled times, but it's also a very important time to think about your future. And today, as part of the SRI HER and TNIE webinar series on higher education counseling, we're going to talk about postgraduate studies abroad and global employment, that elusive PG degree and job that you've always wanted but wondered how to get. Well, we have a full house of speakers, so let me welcome, to begin with, Dr. Raju Balakrishnan, who's Dean of Business at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. Thank you for being here, Professor Balakrishnan. We also have with us Dr. James Myers, who's Associate Provost, International Programs at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Dr. Myers, thanks for being here. And joining us from Swinburne Institute of Technology, we have Dr. Emmett Gadd, who's the Dean of Engineering. Thank you so much for being here. We have Dr. Peter Patel, Associate Dean of Engineering from the State University of New York at Binghamton. And finally, we have Professor V. Raju, who's Provost of Engineering and Technology at Sri Ramachandra University. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. We look forward to an exciting panel to talk about global studies and global employment, what the challenges and opportunities are in a post-pandemic world. Thank you very much for being here. May I now invite Professor Raju to set the context for this conversation and to talk about why it's very important to think about a postgraduate degree abroad in this situation in particular. Professor Raju, if you will.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Daniel. Good morning, Dr. Balakrishnan, Dr. Myers, and Dr. Patel over there in the USA, and Dr. Gadd from Australia. Good evening there. We would like to thank all of you for joining us. It's an occasion to have some of our friends from both parts of the world joining us and just helping you get a perspective on postgraduate studies overseas, as well as what happens afterwards. So to just provide you with the background, we thought of sharing with you the context for our discussions today. If you look at the global student movement in 1998, there were about 2 million students going from one country to the other. That went to 3.2 million in 2008. And by 2018, it was about 5.6 million. If you look at the international students in the USA, it's currently about 6% or so of the total number of students. And that just went from about 200,000 some years back. And the total number of students currently, at least according to the more recent numbers, more than 1.2 million students. And here are some of the students from outside of USA studying in the USA. China happens to be the largest representation, with India number 2, and so on. Also, if you look at the international students in the time frame from 1950 to 2020, initially it was Canada about 1950 with 4,000 students. India at that time had only 1,400 students in the USA. By 1980, the number was about 9,000, and currently, as we said, about 200,000 students are from India studying in the USA. The fields of study, the prominent ones have been for Indian students in the USA: engineering, computer science and mathematics, business and management, and followed by the rest. About 80% plus are students from these areas of study. And if you look at the Australian scenario, and more than 700,000 students have been studying as of 2020. And the proportion of students in some of the countries outside of Asia and other places, Australia, UK, Austria, and these are the OECD countries. In 2010, more than 20% of the students have been in Australia. That number, although is larger, but the countries, New Zealand, Switzerland, Austria, United Kingdom had more than 15% of the international students studying as a population there. In 2000, USA had the largest number of Indian students going from India. About 60% went to USA, but that number shrank by 2016 to about 45%. Canada and Australia took the balance. The students, after getting a degree, a master's level education in one of those countries, end up working for 1 to 3 years. And we have given the countries where the Indian students spend anywhere from 1 to 3 years. In Australia. In the United States, it used to be about a year or a year and a half. Now, those who are studying in the fields that we mentioned can stay for a couple of more years currently. The countries where the students study and end up staying there, Canada, France, Czech Republic, Australia are some of those countries with about 30% of the students after graduation stay there and work. The employment status of the international graduates in the UK, about 13 to 20% or so end up staying there in that country after graduation and continue to work there. In Japan, the number has been increasing for demographic and other reasons. The students who study in the USA, if we take about 250,000 or so students going to USA, and about the similar number after graduation end up being in the optional practical training program, what is known as the OPT. And that number in 2020 was about 200,000. The OPT approvals is given over here, just in thousands. The master students happen to be the largest number of increase between 2004 and 2016, more than 300% in terms of the OPT approvals. And India happens to be the largest with about 440,000 or plus. And there are other categories, special categories, the H1 visa, as they refer to, somewhere around 65,000 people are just allowed to work for the special skills. But those who have master's degrees, they added another 20,000 or so since 2006. The annual cost of studying overseas is a major factor. So Australia with about 35,000, United States right behind, and so on, just to give a perspective. And I think with that, I would like for our panelists to just talk about from their perspective what is happening. I would like to thank all of our friends for joining us. And there are quite a few people who will have questions. Thank you, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, Professor. That was very, I think there's very little that speaks as much as numbers. And then being in India, numbers sort of tend to excite you in so many ways. And I particularly found it interesting that though the pandemic has dented numbers across the board, I recently read that over 75,000 students have already gotten admission. They've already headed abroad to various universities from India. And the government has fast-tracked approvals and vaccinations for these guys. And this is a step in the right direction to setting the balance with students going abroad. And to talk a little bit more about what it's going to be like for international students and what the whole pursuit of a PG degree is going to be like for Indian students, I'd like to invite Dr. Raju Balakrishnan to say a few words.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, Dr. Raju, for the invitation to be on this panel today. It was very interesting to see some of these numbers. And I want to kind of begin my remarks with a caveat. Okay, as you saw in those numbers, a lot has changed, even with regards to Indian students going abroad over the past many years. You know, in my own case, for example, I came to the US in 1981. after finishing my undergrad engineering degree at REC Trichy, now called NIT Trichy. Okay, the circumstances under which we came here, the kind of processes we had to go through, is completely different from what it is today. And I would argue that the pandemic has caused another significant disruption into the way things are happening in the US right now. And I'm going to obviously focus my remarks primarily on the US. So Dr. Myers, Dr. Patel, and I are all sitting on this side of the desk, so to speak, in the sense that we design programs for international students. We try to help them come here and so on. So in a sense, the remarks we are going to make are going to be focused on how things should work, okay? As you are all well aware, there is a difference between how things should work and how they actually work. So I would encourage all the students from India who are interested in coming to the US to talk to your seniors, friends who are already studying in the US or Australia or wherever your destination of choice may be, to find out for, get more firsthand information, so to speak, how things are on the ground. One of the major changes I have noticed since the time I came here and now is the information network. The students are tapped into a tremendous information network. And I know in every university, there is a very strong Indian student network who are, as soon as they know that a student from India is coming, they immediately connect, they give them all the information. So that, I think, is a tremendous pipeline you need to exploit. I think the main question students need to ask themselves when they decide to pursue a graduate education abroad. There are several questions. One, obviously, what am I going to study? Where am I going to study? And how am I going to pay for it? Okay, these kind of become the crux of the matter. I would also add, I think, a critical fourth question. Why am I doing this? Okay, because a couple of things I want people to understand. One, don't ever assume the grass is greener on the other side. Right? Don't come to the US or go to Australia or go to England or whatever your destination of choice because somehow you think things are going to be easy or much easier for you to get ahead and so on. You're going to get this phenomenal high-paying job and so on. Yes, the potential is there. I'm not denying there is potential, but it is also going to be tremendously hard work. And if you are somebody who has never left home, so to speak, you're going to have to face a lot of challenges, both on the professional side and on the personal side, and you get thrown curveballs like the pandemic, for example, where the past 15, 18 months, none of us have been able to, for example, come back to India to see our loved ones. Are you willing to deal with those kinds of things as you make this decision? I can tell you, I've had conversations with so many people like me who came 40 years ago who are all saying, if I had known that I could not go see my parents for 2 years or 3 years and so on, I don't know whether I would have made this decision 40 years ago. Okay, so those are things you got to factor in. Okay, with regards to where the programs you study, Dr. Raju mentioned STEM programs and OPTs and so on. I would strongly urge Indian students to focus on STEM programs. Okay, there are science, technology, engineering, and math programs. It is not surprising that the programs of choice for Indian students tends to be engineering, computer science, and math, and then business. All right, and even within business, we have started so many STEM programs now in analytics and supply chain and information systems and so on. There are some inherent visa advantages or postgraduate employment advantages to doing STEM programs, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about these more later on. That's one. Secondly, the financial situation has changed tremendously in the US. State funding in public institutions and is declined considerably. So as a consequence, the support that universities are able to provide graduate students, particularly master's students, PhD programs still are funded. Master's students is a little more challenging. So you're going to have to figure out what's it going to cost me? What kind of scholarship opportunities exist? And they may be few and far between. So I would also urge you to look at programs where there is a collaboration between your institution in India and an international institution. For example, working with Dr. Raju, we have set up so many partnerships between my university here, and I know that he has got connections both to Binghamton and to RIT, those MOUs facilitate a lot of these connections. So those are things you want to explore, because obviously paying for this is important, and you're going to have to figure out what the return on this investment is going to be. So those are topics I think we need to delve into a little more. And I hope, I prefer answering questions rather than just talking about whatever I want to talk about. So at this stage, I'm going to turn it back over to Daniel. And once we hear from the other panelists, hopefully some of you will bring up questions specifically on these kinds of issues.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. That was 5 minutes on the clock. I must commend you for that. And let me now invite Dr. James Myers to say a few words. And also, as Dr. Balakrishnan mentioned, one of the biggest questions that pops up in a student's mind when they think about studying, whether it's in the US, whether it's in the UK, whether it's anywhere else in the world, really is, am I going to get a solid return on investment on this? And that's the question that they probably don't ask, but should ask more often. And as somebody who works with all of these international students, Dr. Myers, what is international graduate studies going to look like in a post-pandemic world?
Who knows? Let me begin by saying thank you for having me present this morning and be on this panel. I feel very honored to be among this very wonderful group of people, my colleagues who are both here in Michigan and in New York and in Australia, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I think I want to actually reinforce a couple of things that Dr. Balakrishnan said. And yet maybe also say my job at RIT is to encourage all students to go abroad. I don't care about your background. I want to see more American students going abroad. I want to see more of our international students who come here for 4 years with us at the undergraduate level have a unique international experience at the graduate level, which we try to do. We have campuses in China and Dubai and in Europe, and we try to facilitate opportunities for our international postgraduate students to have experiences at those campuses whenever we can. So I think having an international experience is good for a student, regardless of where you're from, what your background is. It'll change your life. That's my personal experience. It's the experience of all the students I work with. So I would just really encourage you to think not just about sort of the payoff in terms of the job opportunity, but sort of the personal development part of it, where you have an opportunity to go abroad and experience another culture, and evaluate for yourself whether it's the place you want to be for an extended period of time or not. So I think there's that aspect of it that I would just encourage everyone to think about. I also agree that it's facilitated, especially at the graduate level or postgraduate level, as you call it, that the institutions have a relationship. That really helps, as Dr. Balakrishnan said. One, I think usually those relationships are set up with some idea about the financial concerns that students have. They're built into most agreements, and usually if your institution has a relationship with another a partner, there's some consideration of the scholarship awards that are given to students. So that really makes a difference. I think it's about when you start looking not just at the sort of reputation of a particular place in terms of its rank within the world. I know that becomes a common reference, but there's so many differences around institutions in the US, particularly in Australia and Europe. Every one of them excels in a particular way. And I think it's important to find a place that is going to sort of deliver on the promise of the work that they do. And I'm proud to say that I think RIT is pretty good at this. We are a place that focuses on careers. Our reputation, I would say, is as a career-oriented institution. We're a cooperative education institution. So we have all of our programs are 5-year engineering, science, technology, engineering, mathematics programs. All of our STEM programs are 5-year programs because we build in a full year of work experience that's required as part of the degree program. And we are set up to be a big OPT program. We have lots of our students who go on OPT and get the STEM extension because we're the 3rd largest private STEM producing institution in the United States. So we produce a lot of STEM graduates. We produce a lot of STEM graduates who go out and work for industry. We do a lot of collaboration with industry. So I think when you look at institutions that you're thinking about, look at the character of the place. And is it set up to deliver on the kinds of things that you want to experience? If your goal is to get a job with a Fortune 500 US company, look at the relationships that the institution has with those kinds of companies. If your goal is to continue on and get a PhD after your master's degree, look at the relationships that the institution has with the top PhD producing universities that you anticipate going to, and what PhD programs do they have that you could continue on into. So I think depending on your goal, if the goal is to become a researcher and to do research work, there's a very distinct kind of university that offers those kinds of opportunities. If your goal is to get a job and to work internationally with a Fortune 500 company, look at institutions that are really good at doing that. I have a slide that may be helpful for all of us. So this slide just kind of quickly summarizes the kinds of OPT experiences there are. And I know we're going to talk more about this, but I just want to get this out there, and maybe it'll save everybody a little bit of time. There are curricular practical training experiences which you can do under with an F1 visa. This is basically the co-op programs and or internship programs, whether it's paid or unpaid. This allows you time to do these kinds of things. So again, for us at RIT, students who come to study with us at the undergraduate level who take advantage of the co-op program, which they are typically required to do, generally get an additional year of study in the United States because of this CPT program. Oftentimes it means that the employer has to support, the ability of the student to go and work for them. But we get many of our international students who get the CPT option. And then there's an OPT, which many of you know about, I'm sure, or have heard about, which is this 12-month work authorization for F1 students. And then as Dr. Balakrishnan said, the STEM extension, the OPT extension, is probably the way to spend the longest period of time in the US if that's what you want to do. And it can be a total extension of 24 months for a total of 36 months after doing your first year of OPT. So those are kind of the classic OPT considerations. And then I'll just quickly summarize sort of where we're at. We put about 900 international students on one of these kinds of programs. We've got about 2,000 co-op employers across the US and overseas who work with us. We've got about 48,000 total jobs that are posted on our career services just last year. And to be honest with you, we didn't see a huge slowdown in these opportunities with the pandemic. And I will tell you right now, the job market in the United States is probably the best it's ever been. And I mean literally ever been. There is acute labor shortages in just about every area of work in the United States, and particularly among skilled people. Their companies are being incredibly flexible with employees in terms of where they work from and how they go about working. So I think in some ways I'm quite optimistic about the short run opportunities that exist. One of the challenges, of course, is that the visa system and the ability to travel and be mobile in the next year still seems really quite constrained.
Thank you so much, Dr. Myers. I think that's possibly the best bit of news that anybody could have asked for, that opportunities are absolutely thriving, because we are always hearing such doom and gloom stories about how the state of the economy is and how jobs are being lost every day. So it's great to hear that young people can look forward to opportunities both abroad and in India. And I think that's a real shot in the arm. So thank you very much for that. Could I now very quickly ask Dr. Peter Patel to tell us a little bit about his work with international students and programs, and also maybe give us a little bit of an idea of how he believes admissions, as far as the admissions this year, graduate admissions this year and the next couple of years, how they will have changed given how classes are largely still, blended and not as physical and in class as they're likely to be in a pre-pandemic world. Dr. Patel, if you may.
Sure. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you to my colleagues on this panel, and of course to Dr. Raju for inviting me to be part of it. A little bit of work, sort of how I think most universities work with international students in very similar ways. So an international student will typically first encounter what we would call an admissions group, right? These are people who are responsible for talking to students, giving them information about the program, steering them, in some cases directly to contacts at the program level to answer questions. As students move through the process, they will then start to interact with international student service organizations at our universities. They facilitate with steering students through the document process, financial disclosures, visas, etc., things like that. Most of us will have an orientation sessions, either both at the university level or perhaps at the department or program level for new graduate students. So these are some of the areas that I am involved in on my campus, and I'm sure my colleagues are involved in these areas on their campuses. And these are the, I think it was Dr. Balakrishnan who talked about how we describe to you the processes as they should go in theory, and these are the theoretical processes that you go through. I wanted to echo Dr. Balakrishnan's comments as well about the informal networks. And this is particularly strong, I think, among Indian students. For instance, on my campus, we have close to 400 students from India. They interact with prospective students at a much deeper level than I ever would or ever do. They talk to them about where they should live. They talk to them about where the bus routes are convenient, where the grocery stores are convenient. So there's this whole informal network that is very, very, very important. And then the other thing I'd like to emphasize from Dr. Myers's talk, because he touched on this idea of rankings, but he also touched on something, I don't think he used the word that I would use, but I would use the word fit. And that is something that we talk a lot about in the United States, which is finding a university or a college that feels good to you, that you fit there. And I think the points that Dr. Myers raised are very valid in terms of if you're interested in working in the US with companies, make sure you identify colleges, universities, or programs that have strong connections to those kind of companies. And I would also then encourage you not to overemphasize rankings. All colleges do some things well. And those things that are important to you, you want to find universities and colleges that do things well. For instance, they support your job search efforts. They're going to help you understand how to write a resume, a cover letter. They help you and provide support for you in your job search activities. Now, a question, Daniel, you mentioned about admissions. The last 18 months has been challenging, of course, for the entire planet, and India in particular. Most recently, the US, of course, has had struggles with COVID, and different colleges and universities have handled those things in different ways. So it's difficult to give a blanket answer about how COVID and the pandemic are going to continue to work or work their effects on the admissions process. But I can speak for my institution, Binghamton University. We've been very, very flexible in, we recognize that students have had trouble sitting for exams, for instance. Exam availability has been a problem. We have made some of our tests optional. For instance, GREs have become test optional at Binghamton. And I'm pretty certain that most universities around the United States, at least, have taken similar steps to try to make that process a little bit easier and be recognizing or cognizant of the challenges that international students face. Of course, the difficulty with visa appointments and the availability of getting visas and flights and all of those things are sort of exogenous to any of the systems that universities are involved in, and we can't control those things. But I think that the answer to your question, Daniel, is really a case by case. I think as students start to look more carefully at different institutions, it's important to ask those questions to find out, okay, what happens if I don't get my visa? Can I defer my admission offer? How long can I defer my admission offer? Is it one semester? Is it a full year? Those kinds of considerations start to become important because, as I think Dr. Myers indicated, we can't predict what this pandemic's going to bring to us. So those are some of my overview thoughts, and again, I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the panel, and I look forward to answering some questions from students.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. I think, like anybody would tell you, nobody can really predict how things are going to go. I mean, I think we can fairly confidently say that almost every prediction about COVID has been proven smashingly wrong. So I really don't know how much of a prediction we can make. But what we can do is we can rely on the information, we can rely on the numbers, we can go on our experience, and after that, I suppose it's everybody's gut. That's all we've got to rely on. But one thing that I'd like to add to what you said, Dr. Patel, you talked about choosing a program, choosing a college, finding a university that's good for you, and it's not necessarily by the numbers. Something that I've learned over the years, and this is something that I'd like to tell all of our young students here with us, is with any foreign university, you will, once you look at their websites and look at their programs, you will get a very detailed overview of who the people teaching you there are. And it's very important to look at the faculty who are going to be teaching you, because I think that can determine how far you go, how well networked you are, and the kind of opportunities that you'd be exposed to. Because some of these often, and this is something that a lot of placement coordinators will tell you, that very often you're getting into a Fortune 500 company or not can depend on who gives you a reference. And it comes down to that sometimes. That's really a hallmark of how you should look at choosing a program. And on that note, may I now invite Dr. Ahmed Gad to give us his opening remarks, joining us from Swinburne. Dr. Gad, if you might.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. And thanks to my esteemed colleagues who've made my life very easy, because they've already shared the critical points and the important points, and that these are true whether one is studying in the US, UK, or Australia. And particularly the point about the fit is quite important. Probably if I'd focus a little bit on the Australian context and looking at our own university's data. As Professor Raju mentioned in his opening remarks, the STEM courses are the most popular amongst our Indian students, and indeed most of our international students. In particular, there are two courses that attract the most students, and we have hundreds of Indian students in these courses. These are the Master of Engineering Science, with different specializations, civil, mechanical, but also new specializations such as Industry 4.0, for example. And the other one is a Master of Construction and Infrastructure Management. There is a major construction boom in Australia, and that is sucking up a lot of manpower. Therefore, there is a acute shortage of graduates with construction management skills. These courses are all two-year courses. They're master's courses, and it's a two-year full-time. In the as my colleagues mentioned, we had a lot of disruption because of the pandemic, and some of our students who traveled back home and continued to study from home. Some who started from India and they continuing to complete the courses while they're there. So we are actually having hybrid delivery. So we're catering for students who are starting in India and delivering online. And obviously, students do not need to study full time. They study 1 unit or 2 units, until the borders are open, until we have freedom of travel, then students would then come back and join in the face-to-face. So that's how we have been dealing with this. So we have new students starting with us offshore, and of course we have the continuing to deliver online until we're able to catch up face-to-face. In terms of where the graduates go and employability, I'd share the same sentiments as in the US. The job market has been very strong in Australia. Indeed, currently Australia has an unemployment rate. We talk about the unemployment rate of 5.1%. The lowest we've had over the last 10 years was 4.9%. So indeed, the unemployment rate as of May this year is actually lower than pre-pandemic. And what it is showing is that the economy is continuing to power ahead, from both government investment as well as the private sector investment. What about our own graduates who've completed these masters I've mentioned? The Australian government runs formal surveys, and these are done at 4 months after completion, and that is an important data for comparing different institutions. So our postgraduate students from engineering, we have an employment rate of 85%. Those who've secured full-time employment within the profession after 4 months of graduation, that is sitting at 85%, which is quite remarkable given the circumstances that we are in. And in terms of starting salary, that's 77,000 Australian dollars. That's a typical graduate salary. That's about $57,000 US dollars. So that's and that is well above the national average, of course, given that the graduates have master's qualification. In terms of long-term, medium to long-term requirements, medium to long-term needs, and these have visa implications, the Australian government does release its medium and long-term strategic skills requirements. These are updated every so often, and currently, if you to visit the relevant websites, you'll find that many of the engineering skills are needed medium to long term, as well as, of course, other STEM courses, particularly in the IT area as well. So not only that there is a short-term opportunities, but the medium and long-term opportunities are also looking pretty good for graduates. Probably that's a point to stop at, and I'm certainly happy to respond to questions.
You know, Dr. Ahmed, I know that a lot of eyes would have lit up when you said 85% employment after graduation, and then followed it up with $77,000 as a signing salary. You know, I think it's a very enticing number for anybody who looks to go abroad and study. So I'm going to thank you for that. Let me just very quickly, before we start taking, we've got quite a few questions in our Q&A box, but just before I jump into that, Dr. Patel and both Dr. Patel and Dr. Myers and briefly Dr. Balakrishnan also were touching upon the point that most universities are flexible because of the way things are in terms of visa delays, in terms of you don't know if your flight's going to take off, you don't know if physical classes are going to be there, and so on and so forth. So let me first just ask Dr. Balakrishnan, in your university at Michigan, could you tell us a little bit about some of the unique cases of how you've sort of gone out of your way to help somebody out when they've not been able to sort of, when they've got an admission but not been able to make it across on time, just so that it could give graduates a little bit of hope that they're not wasting their time and money by, applying school after school,
Right. I think I assume Daniel is focusing particularly on the past 15 months and how we have dealt being flexible with regards to students because of the pandemic. Look, the reality is that graduate education in the US is heavily dependent, particularly in the STEM fields, on international students. So we have a strong vested interest in making sure that our international students feel valued. I think safe to say that almost every university in the US took a big hit last year because we had no international students coming in, new international students coming in. We had a lot of continuing students, but no new international students coming in last fall. And there is a lot of nervousness about this fall. While there is a tremendous amount of pent-up demand and applications and admits and people expressing interest is through the roof in virtually every university, we still don't know how many boots on the ground we will get when the semester actually starts because of visa delays and flight disruptions and so on. So what we have done at the University of Michigan, particularly in the Dearborn campus, is to work literally one-on-one with students to try and accommodate them as much as possible. Okay, so it has gone to deferring their admission. And if there was any scholarship deal agreed as part of the admission, deferring that too, so that the student doesn't lose the financial benefit. And then we've also taken the extra step of allowing students, if they so choose, to start the program remotely from India or wherever they are, and then continuing. Now, keep in mind, the one caveat there is that for the OPT, you need to spend 2 semesters physically here before you qualify for the OPT. So we do make sure students understand that this semester you're doing remotely is not going to count towards the OPT requirement, okay? But again, working with students in any which way necessary to ensure, there were some students who deferred it for 1 semester from fall to what we call the winter semester here, normally called the spring semester, which starts in January. And then of course, conditions hadn't improved in January. They asked for another deferment. We worked with them. So I would say that, the engineering program and the business program are the 2 dominant programs in my university. We each have our own graduate staff. And I know for a fact that my graduate staff in the College of Business has literally contacted every international student one-on-one and spoken to them. Again, communication now is so easy that they've spoken literally one-on-one and reassured them that whatever time and if there's any finances they invested in deciding to pursue education here, that was well spent. Okay, I do want to add one other thing. I think Dr. Patel and Dr. Myers had some very important points about the fit. You need to make sure that whichever university you are choosing fits you. Okay. The worst thing you can do is to chase after a shiny object because it looks shiny. Okay, and I'm not just talking about the university, I'm talking about the program. I'm talking about the job you think you're going to get. Okay, because this question of what is in demand, all right, that is going to ebb and flow, right? And the worst thing you can do is to do a program because everybody is telling you, oh, it's got high demand and you're going to get a great job, especially if it's not a program that you have a particular aptitude or liking for. Okay, you're going to be miserable because keep in mind, whatever graduate program you're doing now is probably defining your career, at least for the foreseeable future. And there's nothing worse you could do than to do something that you're going to hate doing. Okay, So make sure that the program fits you. I've seen this happen too many times where students come here saying, I want to do this, and within few months they realize this program is absolutely not for me. Okay, so make sure you do your research. And again, I think the points we all made about talking to this informal network is critical. Talk to the people who already came, did that, and find out, because they can tell you in blunt terms whether, you know, somebody, I don't recall who it was, talked about which faculty are going to be teaching you. Okay. They'll tell you whether, yeah, you mentioned that, Daniel. And, you know, you may find out that it's not all that it was cut up to be. Okay. So you want to talk to that informal network and get that first-hand information. Now, obviously, you're going to have to take whatever people tell you with a pinch of salt, because everybody puts their own bias into it. But you get this very strong feedback about whether this program fits you. And I'll tell you, I mean, even 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have that luxury. We had to pick programs simply because it sounded good. Okay. Now you can really pick a program because it fits you. Okay, and I would urge you to take that extra step, because I've seen some of the questions that have come up, and people are focused on which is the high demand, which should I do, or, you know, and you're asking the wrong question. You know, that's not the question you should be asking. Okay, that's at least my view.
You know, it's a very I think it's a very practical takeaway that Dr. Balakrishnan has given you. You know, you can go get somebody's profile from a website, but if you want the dirt on them, you need to ask the alumni network. So keep that in mind. Make sure you do your research by asking people who actually studied with them. And I think that's a very practical bit of advice, because there's nothing that you can get on a website that is beyond information. But if you want personal information, if you really want an opinion, an informed opinion on what something is like, you need to ask people who've been there, done that. So thank you, Dr. Balakrishnan. And I must also mention to everybody here that just after Dr. Emmett Gadd made all those, gave us all those fantastic numbers about money in Australia, Dr. James Myers did a little surreptitious one-upmanship game by sending us all a link that says that at RIT, $93,000 was the opening offer for somebody in computer science. So I'm going to give him that. And but I must say it's a very interesting information document. But let me very quickly then ask Dr. Myers. You know, considering how things.
Daniel, if I could just add to that. I mean,
Sure.
One thing for students to recognize is that colleges and universities track that information.
That's actually what I
and if you and if you ask the questions that they should be able to answer that for you. We certainly can answer that for you. We're in line with the others. We're a little less than RIT. I'm sad to say we're only about 85,000 US dollars, but we track it, we watch it, and we make sure that all of our graduates are doing well. So again, as you're thinking about your college search, these are questions that colleges should be able to answer for you.
And like Dr. Balakrishnan actually said, this is something that's coming up in the chat boxes a lot. You know, these are the phrases. It's not just suggest something that's high demand, but suggest something high salary for me to get a great job. And it might not be the smartest of thing, like Dr. Balakrishnan said. You might end up in a job that makes you miserable. But at this point of time, if that's the question you've got, well, we can point you in that direction. We're also going to tell you you need to think about it a little bit, but we can point you in that direction. We've got the stats and figures to back it. So thank you so much, Dr. Patel. Dr. Myers, could I just very quickly ask you, in all of your dealing with how classes have been in the last 15 to 18 months, we've largely moved online. I don't know if you're doing any blended, whether you're doing a blended semester or any sort of in-class teaching this in the current semester or the upcoming semester, but how do you think things are going to go for international students and for students who you already have studying in the US?
First of all, let me just follow up really quickly on what Peter said. The reason I put that in the chat was not one-upmanship. I didn't look at the numbers. I actually wanted to make it clear that all of that information is out there. People should ask for it. You can ask for it, and the good institutions will have the resources for you to look at it. And I'm happy to share that with the students and everybody on the panel, I'm sure are.
Don't worry about it, James. We don't mind the competition.
No,
Yeah,
not at all,
know.
James. And that wasn't implying that either, James.
I didn't take it that way, but I wanted to make sure
I
that
mean, it just
Daniel
pops
understood
up
I
right
was.
there. I love that.
So let me answer the question. We were very aggressive in our responses to the COVID pandemic on our university, as most institutions were. My colleagues in the SUNY system had to deal with a unique set of demands that were placed on them by being part of the state university system, and had to really, essentially were told what they could do. As a private institution, we had a little bit more latitude, and but we were very successful in terms of we never had to transition to 100% online. Throughout the pandemic, we were in some kind of essentially a blended format. The biggest effect on us was in the capacity of our facilities. The social distancing requirements made it so that we couldn't physically distance everyone in the classrooms. And so we went to hybrid course delivery to accommodate that. And also, obviously, to accommodate some of our faculty and students who were vulnerable to the virus. Going into the fall, we are at 100% capacity. We are planning to be essentially 100% face-to-face. We will have some courses that will continue in some kind of hybrid mode or online mode. We are trying to eliminate the hybrid experience. We have found that to be the less than optimal experience for our students, that the students overwhelmingly preferred either get us into the classroom, get us into the labs, get us into a face-to-face environment, or just commit to a 100% online experience. I know that differs all over the place, but that was our experience with our students. They didn't like what we called the split A/B schedules and all that kind of thing. They didn't like it. So we're planning to be 100% normal, essentially, and back to where we are in the state. I think most institutions will be in the same position going into the fall, with back to essentially a normal social distancing requirements. Unvaccinated students will have certain restrictions that they'll face. We're requiring, as I think my colleagues at SUNY Binghamton are as well, requiring all students to be vaccinated unless they have some special accommodation. So in the US here, our experience right now with COVID is, I would say we are all very optimistic about emerging from this pandemic and returning to normal in the fall. During the pandemic, to go to the sort of point of flexibility, given where people are, because everybody's having a different experience all over the world with this. We will continue to do this. We had a remote start for hundreds of students. We allowed that. We basically, since we were delivering courses basically online or in a hybrid mode anyway, going into the fall semester last year, we started a lot of international students remotely. And in fact, we took advantage of our global campuses, and we started a group in art and design at our campus in China. So we've been able to, I think, respond very flexibly, very positively to students all over the world, in terms of the potential impact on COVID. So I think right now our biggest concern, frankly, is the cost of travel and the visa situation for students. The consular services backlog at the embassies and at the consulates is pretty significant. But I will tell you, early indications are that most people are getting their visa appointments. Most people are going to be able to get here with their vaccinations is another concern. If your institution is requiring a vaccination, I think long term, if you're here on this panel or with a student who's listening into this panel, and you're looking at a year from now, boy, I think things are going to be pretty much back to normal. I think the cost of travel may still be higher than it was pre-pandemic, even at that point in time, because I think there's going to be a huge backlog in demand on the travel side. But in the immediate future, in the fall, those concerns are still there. And I think most institutions are trying to figure out ways to accommodate international students who are still facing those limitations. And we certainly are.
Thank you so much. I think that it's very commendable that that you're moving back towards normal physical classes, because that's what the students want. And especially international students will, if you actually have a chat with them, they'll tell you that beyond the teaching and the job opportunities and everything else, I think studying abroad is an experience and it's a life experience by itself. And that's a large part of why people look at specific cities or countries even to go to, because they aspire towards going to some places. And if it's not physical, if it's largely blended, then that's something that they're losing out on. I don't know if a lot of them will admit it, but I've met hundreds of students who actually say, my life's ambition is to go to the USA. Whether it's to work or to study or to whatever, they really just want to go to the USA, and not for a 2-week holiday. They want to study there, they want to experience culture there, they want to see all these things that they're watching in movies and shows on Netflix all the time. And that's an aspiration. And well, I'm glad that you're moving back towards physical. Let me now very quickly jump into some of these questions. I'm sure that most of you have been seeing them. One of the things that caught my eye is this one. And I think that I'll ask Dr. Patel to maybe give us his views on this. Does doing both an undergrad and post-grad course outside India increase our chances of getting a job in that country? Dr. Patel?
Well, actually, so let me try to take a stab at that. And then this is probably an empirical question, and I don't know the data on this. So maybe some of my colleagues will weigh in with some of the practical considerations here. But I think from our perspective, when we evaluate candidates, for graduate admission, having a bachelor's degree from a U.S. school just gives us a little more familiarity sometimes, unless we're dealing with an international university that is a partner of ours, and we have great familiarity with our partners, and Dr. Raju has helped us facilitate many of these partnerships across India. So we build familiarity with an institution, an international institution. We understand their courses, we understand their grading schemes. Having a bachelor's degree from a US institution allows us to have a little more familiarity with the requirements. So it can help you, I think, as you move into your graduate program. Whether that then translates into your necessarily having a better opportunity for employment, I don't know the empirical data on that. I think my guess would be that employment decisions are roughly the same, are made by employers for roughly the same reasons, regardless of your academic backgrounds. They're going to look at your grades, your transcripts. They're going to look at the kinds of experiences that you've had in your academic programs. If you've had an internship or an OPT type experience, or a CPT type experience, or you were engaged in your master's program with some kind of an industry project, those are the kinds of things that will translate into an employment offer for you in the US more readily than if you don't have those kinds of experiences. But I would certainly, if anybody knows the empirical data on that, please chime in. I'm not sure what it is, but that would be my response to that.
I think Dr. Myers wanted to chip in. Did you, Dr. Myers?
Yeah, it's a great.
Pardon me. Just I want to make an observation over here in relation to the question that you had, especially for students going from India overseas for, let's say, engineering subjects. Indian institutions prepare fairly well for graduate studies overseas, just if you look at the academic part of it. However, if someone has an opportunity to study any of these universities, either at Michigan, Dearborn, or RIT, or State University of New York, Binghamton, it would certainly give them a far better preparation in terms of being there at the undergraduate level, going through the learning process over there. However, all of us, Dr. Raju Balakrishnan, myself, and many others, the largest number of students going from India to any foreign countries for studies, they finish their undergraduate studies, usually a 4-year program. You cannot go with less than a 4-year program. Although some universities do accommodate someone with less than 4 years. And there are some special arrangements that we have with a place like Binghamton, RIT. And so there is an advantage, but it does not translate into any better jobs because you studied your bachelor's overseas before you go for master's. If you do very well in India with your bachelor's and then go to any of our partner universities here, Michigan, RIT, State University of New York, or Swinburne University, they would do just as well after their master's degrees in terms of employment. Thank you. And I think Dr. Raju Balakrishnan and all of our colleagues over here have had plenty of experience. Specifically, I worked with Dr. Raju Balakrishnan for about 5 or 6 years in sending students to his programs. And I think he can relate to how well they did after their undergraduate. In fact, they finished some of their master's work here before they joined University of Michigan, and similar things with Binghamton and RIT. Yeah, please.
I think Dr. Myers had something to say. I'll let him go first.
Yeah.
I was going to answer Dr. Partel's, not answer it. I'm going to suggest a data point in the question of, is there any empirical evidence of that? And I would say the only thing that I could offer is that as a co-op institution, right? So all of our students who come into our undergraduate programs are required to do work with a paid work experience with a company. And it's a full year of paid work experience across their curriculum. And most of those students who do a co-op with a company, or the companies that they do co-ops with, will get a job offer from those companies. The percentage is very high. And in a 1-year additional master's program tends to enhance that. So the only thing I would say is that if you did a co-op with General Motors, or if you did a co-op with Toyota or with Apple or with Google or SpaceX or any of the companies that we work with, the chances of you getting a job offer from them is, I want to say it's like 75% of the students who do co-ops get job offers from their employers. So that's the only data point I would offer up. And so if you did that as part of your sort of 5-year, 6-year plan of being in the United States, that is an option. I do want to reinforce what Dr. Raju just said, though, is that, and I want to add something to it. First of all, is that students who study in India are exceptionally well prepared for the rigor of American STEM education at the graduate level. They are really, really well prepared. They're some of our best students. We have 1,200 Indian students in our programs. Most of them are graduate students. Many of them, many of them, 90-some% of them get job offers. So but I want to say, one of the things you have to take advantage of here is that to stand out above other people, there's a lot of good engineers out there. There's a lot of good computer scientists out there. The soft skill part of this becomes really, really important. Your ability to articulate what makes you different, the examples of things that you've done that make you different, your ability to lead, your ability to show that you know how to be part of a team, your ability to innovate and be a good project manager. These all become things that hopefully you can take advantage of and think about a little bit in your motivations for wanting to do postgraduate work, because it's not enough just to be a really good engineer to get a job. There's lots of really good engineers. You have to be also develop some of these other skill sets and take advantage of some of the co-curricular opportunities that all of us offer when you come.
Yeah, let me add a couple of things to that, Daniel. Before I address the undergrad grad combo, I think Dr. Myers is making an excellent point about the soft skill development. And there was a question about the career help that we provide. I think it's fair to say every university is well aware of the fact that a big reason why students come to us, particularly international graduate students come to us, is because they are hoping that that will translate to a job opportunity after graduation. So each of us has a well-developed career services, which kind of helps you right from day one with the soft skills that he mentioned that are critical, the ability to communicate, the ability to network, all those things become important. But then we also have inherent programs built into our degree programs to facilitate that. For example, in my Master of Science program in analytics, there is what is called a Capstone Course, where teams of students work on a real project with a company. And, we are located in Dearborn, which is Ford's headquarters. Ford's global headquarters are right across the street from us. But then Ford is just an example. Ford, GM, Chrysler, you name it, all these companies, they all have tons of data and they want to know what to do with the data. So these teams go in and help them. And I have found that invariably, every one of those teams get a job offer from that company when they are finished, because they've already invested a lot of time. So that's kind of ways by which universities will help you. Ultimately, of course, getting the job and selling yourself is going to be up to you. But you are going to get a lot of support from the universities in developing your ability to present yourself properly to these prospective employers, both from the technical side in terms of what you're learning in the program and outside in the, in the soft skill side. On the grad question that was raised, obviously coming here for an undergrad is a significant investment of time and money. And you got to ask yourself, I'm a business dean, so I'm focusing on return on investments. Okay, what are you going to get out of it? Obviously, you are going to develop a much more robust network as an undergraduate student, and as you all heard, ultimately, it comes down to who knows somebody who knows somebody. It's not simply because you applied for a job and you got it. Usually it's a networking that makes a difference. So being here as an undergrad does give you an opportunity for networking. It possibly gives you opportunities at the end of your undergraduate program to look for employment opportunities too. But as my colleagues have mentioned already, students, particularly from India, are usually exceptionally well prepared during their undergraduate program. So we don't really worry about their lack of preparation when they come for a graduate program. We know that they are able to cope up with the best, especially students from India. I would say an overwhelming percentage of them are not afraid of math. They can communicate. English is something that they are quite comfortable with. So, those are huge advantages. But that said, we do have special programs that somebody who really wants to get an undergraduate experience can take advantage of. Dr. Raju mentioned some programs we have developed. One of the successful programs we have done with several universities in China, although it has not been as popular with Indian universities, is a 3+2 program. And what we do in a 3+2 program is you complete 3 years of your undergraduate degree in India, say in engineering. And then for the 4th year of your undergraduate engineering program, this works only if you have a one-to-one relationship with the institution. You come to, say, University of Michigan to do your 4th year of your undergraduate degree. Okay, during that 4th year, in addition to taking undergraduate courses, we will also allow you to take select graduate courses. Okay. And then at the end of the 4th year, you get your undergraduate degree from your home institution, but you're already in the graduate program at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. And then at the end of the 5th year, you get an MS degree from us. Okay. And it can be in engineering itself, or you can do a combo undergrad in engineering with a graduate degree in a business related field or computer science, or, it can be in any kind of combination like that. So this kind of program is something that I know a lot of students in China do this because they see an inherent advantage to being here early for their graduate program itself. And this is something that of late I've been talking to some universities in India about maybe pursuing because there seems to be some interest in it. So again, as we all said at the very beginning, these kind of special arrangements work best when your institution has a relationship with some university in the US that has developed this kind of an MOU, and look for those. Go talk to your folks in your institution about which universities do you have partnerships, what kind of programs do you have partnerships for.
Twinning programs is the way to go. They've been the way to go for a good many years, but I think that more so now, twinning programs might be easy on the pocket. Remember, if you do both your undergrad and your graduate studies in the US, you will have to lose an arm and a leg. I think you should settle just for the leg and pay that debt off with a good foreign job. All right, let me now quickly move on to this. Very persistently, Akshaya has been raising her hand, and I'm going to ask Dr. Emmett Gadd to maybe try and weigh in on this. She's asking you, because you mentioned that very attractive figure that engineers sort of walk away with in Australia, some courses for computer science and math students that would work well to land a very good job in Australia. Some high-paying courses for computer science students that would land them a great job afterward.
Thanks for that, Daniel. I must admit that graduates with IT, masters in IT, whether it's data analytics or cybersecurity, for example, they would earn more than graduates with engineering at the moment. So the average salary for IT graduates, because of the acute demand, is in the order of about 95 to 100,000 compared to engineers, which is about 77,000. So across the board, there is a demand for graduates, masters and undergraduate students as well, with data analytics, computer science, and cybersecurity. Probably these are the trio that would resonate with most. In terms of undergraduate qualifications that lead into these masters, certainly undergraduates with computer science background or even engineering background, they would have direct entry into masters, particularly if they are 2-year masters. Then they can pick up any gaps that one would have in their undergraduate from their undergraduate course. But probably I'd like to mention a point about what my colleagues have alluded to about the completing an undergraduate compared to a master's. Obviously, every country is a little bit different in terms of the job culture and requirements. In Australia, most jobs do not require a master's qualification. The undergraduate is undergraduate qualification, a bachelor qualification, Bachelor of Engineering or Bachelor of Computer Science would suffice. However, of course, a master's can enhance one's opportunities. However, from a licensing point of view, particularly for engineers, a 4-year bachelor is sufficient. And from students from India, as my colleagues have mentioned, they are technically competent, technically well prepared. So we don't see any deficiencies or any hurdles for those who've completed an undergraduate course from India and moving into masters. Most of our Indian students do very, very well. Probably the advantage of doing an undergraduate course in a place like Australia is as my colleagues have mentioned, it's just about the becoming more familiar with the culture, being more familiar, being more integrated into the community and expanding the network. However, we would probably find that with Indian students, and not many of them who would come and do an undergraduate course with us, probably do not end up doing a master's because they can get a job very easily after completing the bachelor.
Thank you, Dr. Gadd. I see that Dr. Raju Balakrishnan has been busy. He's knocked off a couple of answers to students on the side. I think one of which I'm going to still read out because I think it resonates with a lot of people. And also because this person said, I'm an undergraduate student from NIT Trichy. And I initially thought that's the reason why he picked it up. Someone from his alma mater has written to him, who's confused about whether to proceed for a master's degree or a direct PhD program, which is something that a lot of people have these days. Should I just go for the glory, or should I settle for a master's program? And what should I do? And Dr. Balakrishnan says, this depends entirely on your career plans after the graduate degree, because the MS and the PhD lead to very different career tracks. And I think that's about as sensible as you can get. So if you are looking for a career in academia, perhaps a PhD would make more sense for you, or even for deep industry, if you're looking at it that way. I have a nuts and bolt question, which I think Professor Raju perhaps will be able to answer. This is from Yashodharan. Professor Raju, he asks, what is the possibility of acceptance for a course of study with a CGPA of 6.98?
Mr. Daniel, thank you. Before I answer that, there were a couple of points made by Dr. Raju Balakrishnan and Dr. Myers and others. Let me just share with you this information for a second. That might help.
Please.
Please, I hope you can see the screen.
I can see your presentation, yes.
Yes. So basically, at a place like Rochester Institute of Technology, as Dr. Myers mentioned, the unique aspect of the undergraduate program is the internship or co-op. It's a 5-year program. I had the opportunity to run one of those at RIT for about 13 years. So I know the value of that. The students at the end of an undergraduate degree, as Dr. Myers mentioned, get an excellent job opportunity. And then they would work probably for a year or two and then pursue masters. But for an Indian student going and doing this kind of a program becomes extremely valuable. Now, modeled after that RITs, we created the BTech, the 4-year engineering program. And if you see, starting with first year, second year, each year, we have a 3-month co-op. That's all we could accommodate. However, in the last year, student could work in industry for 6 months or go to a place like our partners at Michigan or New York. In fact, we are working with RIT and State University of New York, Binghamton, and others for the students to finish 3.5 years of study here, go and start their undergraduate part of the work. However, they would take some graduate level courses leading to the master's degree from those institutions. So this becomes extremely valuable for the students to do in terms of time, money, and the opportunity to gain experience. So the student's question, coming to that, yes, it's possible. I think there are a couple of things that are very important. If the student, as it was mentioned, has the right fit and knows exactly what he wants to do, the CGPA that he mentions is perfectly all right, would be able to get. There are universities which require, if there is no partnership arrangements, to have either graduate record examination or GMAT in the case of business school. And so those are some of the requirements. Now, I think in Australia, they're looking at the master's admission based upon number of factors. One of them happens to be the grade point average, but about 70% from the Indian context is okay to get admission. And of course, when you go to a certain program, there are some specific things they look at, not just the grade point average, what the scores and how the person has articulated about the admissions related aspect, what he is looking for, what he plans to do. They would look at the entire thing and then decide on the admission. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I just have a question to ask, and I hope that either Professor Balakrishnan or Dr. Myers might be able to tell me. In the last couple of years, we've not had high school students take their exams, which means that they haven't had their, in India we call it a class 12 or a plus 2, but it's essentially your last year of high school, and you don't really have marks or a grade to go with it, and your assessment is being done based on the last couple of years, or in some states the last year of your study, and they've given you a sort of weighted average. a lot of people have been very concerned that because they've been gearing up for these exams and it sort of determines the way their life goes. And they've been putting blood, sweat, and tears. And at the minute the government said, no, we're not having an exam because of the pandemic, they thought, oh my God, here go my grades. I'm probably not going to get into a top-notch university. So I just wanted to ask, given how things have been with the pandemic, has this not having an exam, not having a CGPA from a +2 exam, has it affected how people view international education? I think Dr. Balakrishnan might have a slightly more nuanced view of this because I'm sure he wrote his +2 exam many years ago.
Actually, I did I'm older than you think I am, Daniel. I did the 11-year CBSE program. I didn't even do a +12. I did only 11 years of high school.
I'm sure the rigors were the same, though. I'm sure the
rigors were the same. That is true. That is true. But in any case, I think this topic we've addressed in the past, in the sense that I think all the universities here are being extremely flexible, and I suspect this flexibility will remain in place for the foreseeable future, because we all recognize the severe disruption that the pandemic has caused globally and is continuing to cause globally in certain parts even today. Okay, so I think we mentioned earlier about not requiring the GRE or waiving the GRE or the GMAT right now in many cases. Similar to the +2 exam that you were referring to in India, students here take the SAT, okay? SAT has become optional in so many universities, including the really elite universities also,
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that was a major component of deciding, right? Getting that 2400 perfect score in the SAT was kind of chip you had to say, I got a perfect score. Now many students don't have that, So we are evaluating applications in a different way. I think you mentioned it. We look at, Dr. Raju mentioned how we look at the wholesome picture. It is not just about GPA. It is not about any one thing. It's a combination of things. And again, it does turn out that a significant number of our students do come from programs that we have partnerships with, from universities that we have partnerships with, where the flexibility is even more enhanced. Like, for example, many of the partnerships I have with India, for instance, we even waive the TOEFL because if the university is instruction we know is English, we say, yeah, that's, we're going to assume that you know how to read and write and speak English, and we don't need you to particularly take this TOEFL exam to prove to us that you know what you're doing. So I think that flexibility is going to remain. So for the students who are concerned about not having that particular transcript and so on, I would put your fears at ease. I think you can always explain what happened. Everybody understands that we operated in a completely different environment. I can tell you, in many universities in the US over the past year, a lot of universities have offered students the option of getting pass-fail grades as opposed to letter grades, which means these students are going to graduate with transcripts which simply show a whole lot of courses with a P next to it rather than an A or a B or something like that. And, employers are going to have to deal with that, this was the pandemic related situation. So I would not worry too much about it if I were a student today.
I think the whole ecosystem is also sensitive to the needs of students today, and I think that's a great thing. One last question that I hope everybody can just very quickly chip in with, and I know that we have a majority of engineering professors and people who've been doing engineering, because we have Professor Balakrishnan, who's a business professor through and through. A lot of students in India have this question. They've done 3 years degrees, which aren't engineering degrees. They've done arts and science degrees, but they all want to sort of study something that may not be liberal arts alone. Because in India, if you study a degree in physics, people are going to tell you do an MSc in physics, which is our postgraduate program. They never tell you to go take an MTech. That's very rare. And that's probably an Indian mindset that's slowly changing. But when it comes to graduate studies in the US or in any other country, really, what are the opportunities for students who've studied pure arts and science 3-year programs in India? Is there a barrier? That's a question that's come through. I'm paraphrasing, of course. So if you could, if Dr. Myers could respond, and then Dr. Patel could chip in, and then we can sort of wrap things down very quickly.
Well, the first thing I'll say is it's really exciting to hear that those kinds of students have interests in looking at pathways to study in the United States. I think it's one of the things that we miss out on in the United States is having a diverse population of students from India. We overwhelmingly get the scientists and the engineers and the mathematicians. To think about having students who have interest in the arts and social sciences and in humanities. And I think the advent of STEM-based business programs, like the kind that Dr. Balakrishnan has referred to, and we have those too. So that give you a pathway into business STEM master's degrees with a humanities background absolutely is a pathway. I think if you want to study, continue your studies in humanity and social sciences, there are really exceptional opportunities for people who want to do that, I'm sure, at all of our institutions. RIT being a STEM institution, we also are probably one of the strongest design programs actually in the world. We're ranked, I think, number 8 in the world in industrial design. So a student who's interested in the arts and might want to go into design and has really great job opportunities in the field of design where they could apply their background in even anthropology, which is a core subject area for design-centered research, or human-centered design. There's just a lot of really interesting, I think, pathways and opportunities, and it's exciting to think that there are more Indian students who are interested in those pathways, because it would really enrich our campus life and the experiences that we would afford all of our students if that were to be the future.
And some phenomenal diversity, obviously. Thank you, Dr. Myers. Dr. Patel, just your thoughts on if students who've done 3-year science programs, and I know Dr. Raju, of course, has told us in the past that Ramachandra even does BSc programs in things like data analytics and AI, which are emergent fields. Would they be able to get into graduate programs in emerging fields, especially in STEM in universities in the US? Is that something that is possible?
Yeah, it is possible. We get this question actually quite often, and different programs will handle this differently. So sometimes a program, if it's something like an electrical engineering program, there may be the graduate program may offer some suggested courses that the student take to fill in gaps. There are other programs, for instance, applied mathematics type programs. We have a program called System Science. It's sort of an applied math, a little bit of systems engineering, and the entry into a program like that is based more heavily on your mathematics preparation. So it's not engineering preparation specifically. It'd be more of a well-rounded preparation in science and math. So there are opportunities for those kinds of programs. And then those programs you can leverage into a STEM job opportunity, which, as we've talked about earlier, affords you some additional benefits in terms of OPT and things like that. So you can launch from those kinds of programs into a STEM type career.
And you'd also walk away with a much more lucrative job offer, I'd say, which I think is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for a lot of people. And on that note, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a phenomenal session. Let me thank Dr. Balakrishnan, Dr. Myers, Dr. Gad, Dr. Patel, and Dr. Raju. Thank you so much for being here and telling our students everything that they wanted to know, answering those questions very patiently. You've been a fantastic panel. And I hope you guys had a good time, everybody who was part of this. And remember, we have one last webinar coming up next Saturday. Do tune in for that, register as well. Thank you very much on behalf of Srihar and GNI. It's been a great experience having you here. Good night and stay safe, mask up and get vaccinated. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Daniel,
depending on where in the world you are.
Daniel, I would like to thank our colleagues, Dr. Raju Balakrishnan, Dr. Myers, Dr. Patel, and Dr. Gad. I'm extremely thankful, especially early morning in the USA and late evening in Australia. These are my friends and colleagues, and the association has been long-standing, and I'm very grateful to all of them for taking their time on a Saturday, either very late or very early in the morning. Thank you very much. You please have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure, Raju.
Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, Raju.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.